I'm Donna Martin, formerly Donna Kurtz. I don't know if I had any of your students. I actually had people pop up as former students. I don't look that old, but I am. So I have children as well. I have a freshman in college and a freshman in high school. So I've been through middle school, so I know your pain, and I know your happiness and your joy and everything else that you're going through. So I did teach here starting in 1992. I student taught here when I was going to Boston University, and then I was fortunate enough, because no one was hiring social studies teachers at the time, there was no vacancies. Mr. Tobin retired. I don't know if they had Mr. Tobin, but so he retired, so I got his position for January through June in 1993, and then got riffed a couple of different years just to build character, but luckily positions kept opening up, so I stayed here. I taught 8th grade in the beginning. I was on a split team for a couple of years, 7th grade world geography for 12 years, and then went to the high school for a couple of years. I was hoping to go into curriculum department head coordinator, which I did, and my boss at the time, Dr. Kent, said, you should go to the high school and learn what it's like at the high school, and I said, but I love it here, and he said, it's better to go to the high school. So I did, and I did love it at the high school, and it was great because I learned, you know, as an 8th grade teacher, 7th and 8th grade teacher, you're really working hard to prepare your students for the high school, and so it was nice to go to the high school and learn like what they actually experienced at the high school, and sort of, it really helped me in my job now as assistant principal know what to tell the teachers what they need for the high school. So I did that for a couple of years, and then the opportunity wasn't here in Arlington for a department head, so I reluctantly left Arlington, which I loved. I mean, I always said I would never find a school as happy as Ottoson when I was here. So when I started here, it was the 7-8, and then we went to the high school for a couple of years, and then when I came back, it was the 6-7-8. So most of the time I was here, but I was here originally when it was just the 7-8, so I have experienced that, which is nice. So went to Chelmsford, did curriculum for about 3 years, and I thought I loved it. I loved working with the teachers, doing professional development. I was grades 5 through 12, so I did, you know, all the history curriculum, grades 5 through 12. Worked, you know, very closely, especially with the English coordinator and the reading coordinator, doing a lot of interdisciplinary professional development, things like that. And then the opportunity came up for the assistant principal job. When I was curriculum coordinator, like I said, I loved it. I missed the children. When I first got the job in May, June, I thought, I don't think I'll miss the children that much. And then I did actually miss the children a ton, I surprised. And I am so happy that I got this job 9 years ago. So at McCarthy, it's a 5 through 8, which is excellent because I know what the lower grades need. I work very closely with we have 4 elementary schools, 2 main feeder schools, and we get a smattering of other children. Work very closely with the principals, the guidance counselors there to make sure the 4th graders coming in are as 5th graders are placed correctly. And then as the 8th graders leave, I work very closely with the high school to make sure they're placed correctly. And I got a call from one of the deans at Chelmsford High yesterday. What do you know about this young lady? She's struggling, help me out. So we still, you know, continue to work together. So, sorry, you have that in front of you, but I just want to give you a little bit of background. So I love the middle school. People give me an odd look when I say I love the middle school, kind of the same odd look I give to kindergarten teachers. Bless them, I don't know, I couldn't do it. So, you know, I think everybody has to find their space and find what they love to do. I love middle school. I loved Ottoson. It pained me to leave Arlington, but I'm so glad that I did in a way because it made it so that I could see something else and really learn more from another district. So Heather Galante taught at the high school at Arlington High. She followed me to Chelmsford, not followed me, we ended up in Chelmsford coincidentally 1 year after, and we spent a little bit of time saying, oh, you know, in Arlington they do it this way, you know, but I really learned sort of the way they do it in Chelmsford and other districts, working with lots of different people. I think that sort of broadened my horizons, made me a better educator, and really sort of ready 9 years later after being an assistant principal to be a principal. We have a school of approximately 850 children. It's kind of fluctuated over the years. So there's a principal, there's me, one assistant principal. So the principal and it's an excellent opportunity to work as a team a lot of times. So I feel like I've experienced the majority of things, if not all of the things that a principal experiences when he's out of the building. I make the decisions, you know, he consults with me. We really do work as a team, which is great, and it's been a great experience. So I feel ready and excited about the opportunity for being the principal of the Ottoson. So that's a short story. So, but whatever questions you have, I'm happy to answer. Yes.
Hi, can you just talk a little bit about sort of your approach towards leadership development? You know, so how would you sort of encourage teachers at the middle school to be leaders in their, yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't done that one yet. That's a good question. I think that's so important. I mean, I think my former boss, Dr. Kent, who was the leader of the social studies department here, always worked with us to become leaders. You know, he would give us opportunities. You lead this professional development, and, you know, not that he was giving me his work, you know, but he said he would notice who wanted to take over extra responsibilities. You lead this work, sort of breeding, you know, leadership. In my job currently, I have a couple different teachers who were getting their CAGs, and I was their mentor and brought them in, and they worked with me on a bunch of different things, sort of whatever direction they were interested in. Whether they were interested in special ed leadership, which I can help them with a little bit, with sort of discipline or sort of in the building, or, you know, just sort of working with kids and building relationships. So I was able to, you know, spend a lot of time working with them in developing leadership. I think teachers need that opportunity. So I would like to, you know, teachers are interested in more leadership, more leading the school. If they're interested in running sort of a group, you know, a study group to look into something that people have in particular interest in, like sort of executive functioning, things like that, I would love for them. I would love to help facilitate them getting a bunch of books to read together or something like that, and then presenting with their findings to the rest of the building. I know that when I taught here, I had the opportunity to take a bunch of classes on differentiated instruction when it was sort of cutting edge, and with Nancy Krasko and a bunch of different people, and Amy Duke helped us out a lot. I know she's still here. And so we worked in groups, and we went to, like I said, learned a lot about differentiated instruction and put a lot of materials together and presented it to the rest of the staff. So that was, you know, so I luckily had experience with a lot of those things, so I would love to be able to mentor teachers or just encourage them to take leadership roles in the building.
What's your vision for the school?
My vision I think my starting vision for the school is to hear a little bit about, and this sounds, I don't mean to sound like a cop-out, but having been away for 12 years, I'd like to hear sort of what everybody's vision is. I mean, it's going to go through a huge change, right? The sixth graders are going to leave, and it's going to be just the 7-8. I remember what it was like when it was a 7-8, and I remember being here and how happy a school it was, and it's truly, it was such a community. Everybody worked together. There was a ton of interdisciplinary work. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to make sure, I know advisory is going on now, and there's talks about, you know, whether to continue advisory, not to continue advisory, sort of the benefits of advisory. So I'd like to really look into that and see where we wanted to go with that and how we can make sure we're continuing to build relationships among each other, between the staff and the students, and among the students. I think the more we know each other, the more we understand each other, the better everybody gets along, and the safer the school is, that we're more able to learn. So, and I'd like to really just make sure the transition is very smooth for the sixth graders coming in from the Gibbs when they come, or, you know, obviously in this fall will be from all of the elementary schools, but then in the future from the Gibbs when they've had their 1 year there, and then they're feeling ready after 2 years here to go on to Arlington High School or wherever they happen to go. So I think that would be sort of my vision, just to make sure that this is, I mean, 7th and 8th grade are such formative years, to really just make sure that the students get the most out of their time here, that we can get them in, they can be placed correctly, get them settled, get to know them, build relationships, really make sure they're comfortable, get them learning, and then, you know, solidify that so they're ready to go on to the next place. But in doing that, I want to hear, I mean, you all and the teachers and the administration, everybody have been working for years on sort of what to do with the Ottoson and how to reconfigure the grades. So I'd want to hear from all different groups and all different parties involved, sort of your vision for the school, so that we all work together to sort of move together as a collective vision. So, yes.
Can you describe how you view and think about supervision and evaluation of your professional staff?
Yes, I view it hopefully as a conversation and a process and a discussion of improvement of practice, and sort of, you know, my hope is as an evaluator, and I think I've achieved that, is that it's not stressful. I'm not looking for a gotcha moment. I want to support all teachers and really make sure that they are getting whatever they need in their classroom to help improve their practice, and that they feel comfortable to ask me or whoever their evaluator is to work on that, to improve that. So I know that, so when I was a teacher, my supervisor would come in and he was great, and this is completely not bragging, but he would always give me excellent reviews. And I think that I had a lot of places to improve, but he didn't really, I wanted sort of constructive feedback, like push me, you know what I mean, make me, and so that's what I like to do in a non-threatening way, like, that's great, like, you're doing a great job, but have you thought about this? Can we work on this? And I think that my style is such that I would like to think in general I'm not threatening. I have teachers all the time say to me, Donna, can you come, I'm trying this new lesson, I'm trying a jigsaw, I'm not sure how it's gonna go, can you come just watch and see how it goes and give me some feedback? I'm having trouble giving directions or the kids aren't really getting the directions, and I'm not sure if I'm just not delivering them right. Can you come check this out? Or different things like that. So they ask me to come in. I think the majority of teachers, of educators, are professionals and are looking to improve their practice just like we all are in our jobs. So I would welcome feedback from them as well, by the way, even though they don't evaluate me, or from you all or whatever. How, this is, I need a little bit more in this area from you. What, can you help me out with that? So, yep.
Can you please comment? I see you've done this curriculum work 5 through 12, or I don't know if it's a vision question, but can you just comment on technology in the classroom, at home? I mean, I understand it's a connection for parents, but more technology as an educational tool and how you envision it, not for 5th graders, but I guess for the middle school.
Well, I think it's here. Technology is here. So the more that students can be taught to use it appropriately and productively, the better. So, and I see it used, we have fortunate enough, all of our 8th grade science teachers have Chrome carts in their classrooms now, which is nice. And all of our teachers have, sort of the projection and the whiteboard and things like that. So anytime technology can be used to help with research and to help to teach them how to not just copy and paste, but really sort of take notes if they're doing research, and how they, determining the validity of a website. Or are they using, one of the things I love that our teachers use all the time is Kahoot, which I believe they do use here because they brought it up with the teachers and they mention it. But Kahoot is terrific, and it's a great formative assessment to figure out, just sort of dipstick, are the children getting, do you know what Kahoot is? Okay, all right. Okay, I'll just explain it really fast. It's just like a quick quiz, not everybody knows. It's like you can do 10, 15 questions, multiple choice, and the children can use whatever device they happen to have. So if they have Chromebooks, or if they have iPads, or they can use their own phones, depending on the rules of the school, and they just log in, they give a name, they don't have to give their own name, but the teacher knows who everybody is, and they give the answer. So the teachers have data as to how well the students are doing. They can say, okay, well, everyone understood that volcano question except for this fellow, so we got to talk to him about the volcanoes. Or, wow, no one got that earthquake question, so obviously something went awry there, so let's go back and talk about earthquakes some more, because no one got that question. So things like that, I think, or clickers, sometimes they're called, to different types of technology. I think that's an excellent sort of formative way to just check in a very anonymous way with how the students are doing. So, yep.
Go ahead. Hi, so could you tell me more about what your perspective or value is around middle school education experience? Like, what makes you passionate about this grade and stage?
I love them. They're misunderstood, I think. They need love, and they are presented as unlovable sometimes. And so they just need, but they want, they want us to love them, to listen to them, and to give them structure and consistency. And so that's sort of in a positive manner. Lots of positive feedback, lots of, how are you doing? How is your day going? How is the soccer game? How's the violin practice going? Just a little, something here and there. So I think that they are so trying to figure out what's going on with them. They're right in between, in the middle, so to speak, of, being a kid and trying to be an older teenager or an adult. And they get confusing messages. Yes, you can do this. No, you can't do that. Their bodies are changing. All the hormones are like throwing them off a ton. And so they just need consistency, they need to know what the routine of the class is going to be, they need to know what the routine of the school day is going to be, and sort of, if they do this, then this is going to happen, in a positive and also sometimes a consequential way. And they appreciate that. I remember when I student taught and I was 22, and they said, a bunch of 8th graders, and they said, at the, I think I did okay with Phil Hagar, but at the end I polled them and I said, well, what do you think? And they said, you're too nice. Like, you need, like, tell us to be quiet. You know what I mean? Like, tell us, they want to be told to be, they're telling me, a 22-year-old, they want to be told to be quiet and follow along so that things can get done. They can participate in the class in a positive manner, and they want to be smiled at, and sometimes they like to go to the nurse for like a hug and a cracker, and but they act tough, and so they just need us to understand that that's okay. And if you give them a sticker on their paper when they do really well, they're gonna love it, right? But they would never ask for that sticker, right? But they will love a sticker, and if you put on The Lion King, they know all the words and they'll sing along, even though they would never watch that movie. So it's, it's just sort of this, difference in them that I love, that I'm very passionate about, that I don't know, I think they're great. And I think they need a lot of that, so they're ready for high school and ready to go on and just do great things. Go ahead.
What's the biggest challenge you face as an assistant principal, and how did you manage it?
I think the biggest challenge is sometimes has to do with sort of the word bullying, but just that's sort of a very broad topic. I think that's one of my most frustrating things, is just trying to figure out what's going on. And really, because my number one thing is everyone feeling safe and everyone feeling comfortable and able to learn, and that no one's giving anybody a hard time. And so that's my most frustrating thing that I continue to deal with. And I just encourage parents and students and teachers and everybody all the time, please talk to me or somebody as soon as you get a whisper that something's going on. Because the sooner I know, the sooner we can start to talk about it and work on it.
Do you have a specific example of something that happened that you can share with us about how you managed that?
I know, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. Yes, this was a few years ago. I had a bunch of 8th graders. And this is a very serious example. This is not representative of what goes on every day at McCarthy, but this is a very big, serious example, so it stands out in my mind. So I had a bunch of 8th graders, and I had a few 8th grade boys who I had developed good relationships with, and they mostly were making some better decisions, but not all the time. Again, very hormonal and different things. And they, flirted with a lot of girls, and the girls flirted back, and that was, it was fine. It was typical 8th grade. Well, come to find out sort of weeks/months later that a couple of the boys had been sort of occasionally, they were playing some sort of game where they were like hitting the girls on the bum, right, which is completely inappropriate and very disturbing. But I didn't find out for a long time. And so by the time I found out, it was sort of a big thing and everybody was very upset, and it was frustrating for everybody, because I felt badly for the girls, because I would have put a stop to it in an instant had I known. And then I felt also badly, for the boys a little, because they got in a lot more trouble with the accumulation of everything than they would have if we had just talked about it from the beginning and said, you gotta cut it out, like this is not appropriate, and you know that, and like let's discuss why it's not appropriate, and really just have that conversation. And the parents are justifiably very upset with the whole thing. And so we all worked together, and I think it all got remedied, and by the end of the year everybody was friendly and it was okay. But it was a very big thing that I think could have been stopped had it been brought to our attention sooner. And I know it's hard to talk to me sometimes as the child, just because I think I'm pretty nice and I know their names and I see them in the hallway, but sometimes it's intimidating to talk to the assistant principal. But we have awesome guidance counselors and other people that, and I just want, I tell the children, talk to your parents, talk to your classroom teacher, like somebody. So that's what I do.
What were the consequences for the boys that were involved in that?
It was varying, but they were suspended, and they were put on escort actually for a while too. We took it very seriously. So it was quite serious. So go ahead.
What are one or two things that you've done in the past 9 years as assistant principal that you would say has really moved practice or improved the school? What are a couple details of that?
well, there's a couple different things. So, you know, I'm gonna start with those boys, for instance. So that's one thing, is those, despite that discipline thing in general, you know, they were sort of showing, starting in 6th grade, that school wasn't their first priority. And so they, you know, they had a hard time in reading, and then they were having a hard time in their classes and different things. So there's the principal, the assistant principal, me, and then there's the supervisor of students, who unfortunately is a very sort of low-paying job. He's not an administrator, but he's sort of the first line of discipline. So he does a lot of that stuff. So he and we had sort of a substitute teacher in reading. The boys were giving that teacher a very hard time. So we pulled them out of reading every 6th period, and we taught them reading, and really worked with them and picked literature that would help them. And then also every other first period in grade 7 and 8, they had sort of a directed study. It was for all the kids who weren't going to performance music, which they weren't. So we started a group, we pulled them out along with a couple of other kids and really worked on their executive functioning and getting them studying for tests and things like that. So it started with them, but it continues today. That was about 7 years ago. It continues today. It's called SSG, Student Success Group. And we pick out I will say the guidance counselors run it almost 100% now. It's something that supervisor of students and I started, and I helped to nurture, but thankfully we have awesome school counselors who run it. But they identify with the classroom teachers struggling students who just need a little bit of extra help, especially those not in IEP who are not getting any sort of extra help built into their schedule, and just work on their executive functioning, their organization, getting them prepared for tests, making sure they, you know, are studying for things. Lots of times the classroom teachers will come down and help them study for a test. So it's, you know, it's really just a great sort of little small group to help some kids who are struggling. The other thing, more curriculum-based, is I have run some study groups over the last few years. Usually in the morning, about 15 to 20 teachers join. So I think I mentioned before, we read a book on executive functioning and sort of developed a common language curriculum. You know, because a student will see in 5th grade, they'll see a graphic organizer that looks like a hamburger, and then they'll see the same one in 8th grade, but or something like that, but they're called 2 completely different things for 4 years. And every year they're like, you know, the teacher will say, well, you've used this before. Well, no, I haven't, because it was called the hamburger one, the cheeseburger, and the Big Mac, and the other. And so, you know, like, let's develop this common language. So a Big Mac is a Big Mac, and I always know what that graphic organizer looks like and when to use it, and all these different studying strategies. So I did that one year. The following year, we read Lost at School by Ross Greene, just talking how to make more connections with children, and we sort of built on that. And this year and last year, we're sort of doing social and emotional issues and learning, positive behavior intervention strategies, which is sort of like actually district-wide, but we have a smaller group. So that's sort of what I'm proud of, just sort of having these small groups that then go back and present, that I more facilitate, the teachers more run them. Go back to the bigger group and help to bring this common language and this common sort of ways to help children in the classroom.
As a follow-up to that, what would you say, besides not intervening in this situation early enough, what would you have done differently? One scenario where you said, I really missed the mark on that. What was that? How did you handle it? What would you do differently?
So this actually happened this year. There was just a difference of opinion between 2 teachers. Well, we have 2 different reading specialists who sort of take different grades, and one of the reading specialists has a very challenging class, just because of the way the schedule goes and sort of the makeup of the class. And we were hoping to, because of the scheduling, we were hoping to enlist the help of the other reading specialist. And sort of the way it went about, it sort of blew up, and feelings were hurt, and people felt like, both the principal and myself, but we're stepping on their toes kind of, and that wasn't their job description. And so I wish we had sort of looked at the bigger picture of the situation. I thought, you know, I thought we had come up with sort of an easy solution that was going to work out perfectly. We didn't think enough about the bigger ramifications. So I think it's just that and we ended up, it got resolved. We brought in some different personnel, and it's, you know, it's fine now. But I think just sort of looking at really, I think I didn't look at it from the teacher's point of view enough, which is not something I feel like I normally do, but in this case, it was the beginning of the year, and the discipline issues in the class were, well, haunting me is a little dramatic, but you know what I mean? It was every day. So it was sort of in a hurry to get it resolved, and so I didn't take enough time, and I think normally I think I'm a little bit more reflective, but that was something that I'll remember now, so.
What's your opinion, both as an educator and a parent, on the MCAS? And I know that you've got to have this sort of professional, we need funding and sort of toe the line, but.
I think there's a need to a certain extent for standardized testing and to help a lot of struggling schools sort of really focus their curriculum and improve, and focus on sort of maybe where students are lacking and improve the struggling schools. I think for a district like Arlington that's not as struggling, I think it can be helpful. I think you can really look at I think MCAS is good for looking at the data and seeing where students, and specifically what groups of students may be falling down. So I think the data that MCAS produces is good. I do like sort of where, it's frustrating that it keeps changing, but I do like where the direction that the new MCAS is going in terms of the sort of the drop down, the drag and drop, and the different, in the literature you're comparing 2 different stories or 3 different stories as opposed to just looking at one and writing your very sort of, I can't think of a little bit, 5-paragraph essay where it's, so prescriptive, as opposed to letting the children have a little bit more creativity in their writing and really being able to like think outside the box about where what they're reading and what they're learning. So I'm hoping we're heading in the right direction with MCAS. I think, as a parent, my children did okay on it, so it didn't stress me out, but it can be stressful. So I don't, and it does cause a lot of stress, I will say that, and it also takes up a lot of time. So we're doing the, in the building, it can take up a lot of time. We're doing the scheduling now for grades 5 through 8. Grades 5, 7, and 8 are all computer-based. So where does that technology come from? And so, we're borrowing Chrome cards from the science teachers, and so that, that's a little bit frustrating that it sort of stops, or changes the way curriculum is delivered in a bunch of different classrooms for many weeks. So that can be a little frustrating. So I think there's definitely pros and cons. So, go ahead.
Speaking of stress, homework. What's your philosophy on that? We have currently in the handbook a 1.5 to 2 hours is supposed to be the average nightly homework. You have 4 core curriculum teachers that are trying to get through the core. A lot of them offer, assign more homework than that. And many kids take a 5th or 6th subject that has homework if they take a language and they're in another class. How do you balance that with a teacher that's maybe not following that guideline? We're talking a lot about stress these days with kids, and
well, I think that's a conversation with the teacher. And then I think just trying to find the balance and making sure as a department, I think I wouldn't want to come in as the administrator to say what you should be giving for homework. But I would like, as the department with the curriculum coordinator, to really look at what is meaningful, what is necessary, and what can be sort of pared down so they can get through the content. Also, I like the rule, I think we used to have it here, I know we have it at McCarthy, after 20 minutes, if you've been working along very hard, the parent can sign they worked for 20 minutes, and sort of, so you're really looking at quality over quantity. I think the homework question is huge because, and also in terms of how much it's weighted, because it can, so for some kids who do their homework really, diligently and don't do so well in tests, if the homework, depending on how much the homework weighted, that can really help their grade. For some, but it's frustrating for the kids who, homework is not really for them, but they do very well in the tests. Obviously, they're acquiring the content. So trying to find that balance. I think it's an ongoing conversation that's very worthwhile having. Making sure that children aren't too stressed out, because they should have enough time to play an instrument, to play a sport, to be in a play, to do whatever, the things they want to do too, to have that whole child. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you.
First of all, I am married and live in Belmont. I have 3 daughters. I have one who's a freshman in college, one who's a freshman in high school, and then I have a 7th grade daughter as well. I grew up in Rockport on the North Shore of Boston. went to the University of New Hampshire, went to Boston College, and got a job back at my old middle school in Rockport. So I was there for a year, but unfortunately in the early 90s, with budget problems, a lot of times you got pink slips if you were a non-tenured teacher. So I got a pink slip at the end of the year. My position would be saved, but I went out and interviewed and got a job in Concord. And I was at the Concord Middle School for 5 years, learning how to become an educator. Loved my time in Concord. I was coaching at the high school, and I was a 6th grade social studies teacher. And I thought one of the really, really nice things was I would get to meet kids as they were leaving the elementary school. I'd get to have relationships with them, and then I would see them in high school as they were getting ready to graduate and go to college. And I just thought that was wonderful. And I think I would have been in Concord probably for the next 30 years, except for my wife came home one day and she said I was given the opportunity to go to London and run an office, and it's free housing and we'll have a great time. And so I thought that was wonderful. In fact, I see someone who used to work with my wife, so she can vouch for that story in London. So we were there for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, I came back and I got a job at the Wellesley Middle School. It's probably where I grew up as an educator. I worked for just a wonderful principal by the name of John Doria, who ran an outstanding building. He built trust. It was a place in which people were excited to come to work. It's where the kids were well behaved. They were on the cutting edge, I think, of a lot of educational philosophies and trying things. It wasn't static. It was dynamic and fun. And once again, I thought I was there for the duration. We had our third child at this time, and she was just a little sickly, and we decided to take, or I would take 2 years off. And during that time, John encouraged me to go back and get my administrative degree. I did. I got excited about leadership and the idea of becoming an administrator. I sat next to 2 people from Norwood at the time, and these 2 people from Norwood said that there was a great job opportunity there. They said they need a varsity soccer coach. I said, great. They said we have a new position in which we have a dean of students. It was called a housemaster's job, and it allowed you to teach, but do some scheduling, do some discipline, be involved in some leadership decisions. So I went to Norwood, and Norwood was a fun but chaotic place. I came there, and as I entered kind of my career in Norwood, the first thing that I knew was the assistant principal that had been there the year before had actually been arrested from embezzling funds from the teachers union. I was looking for a little bit more stability. A job came up in Dover Sherburne, and I've been there as the assistant principal for 5 years. I enjoy it. I really like the administrative staff that I work with. The kids are great, but I'm getting ready for the next challenge. And so this year I decided about kind of what I wanted to do. It might be because I'm turning 50 that I'm having all these kind of reflective moments. But I said, I'd like to become a building leader. I would like to hopefully put into practice some of the things that I've learned. And I decided what are communities that I would feel at home. And Arlington was on that short list. And the people that I have met from Arlington have an incredible pride for their school system and their town. There's people I meet from Belmont, and they talk about how they enjoyed their childhood, and sometimes their grandparents enjoyed their childhood in Arlington. And I know right now the demographics are changing, and there's a lot more people in the school, so it seems like it would be an exciting place to work at and hopefully, have some change. And when I walked around the building, so I had an all-day walk around the building, it felt like it fit. And so as I walked around and saw teachers doing creative units and having kids grouped well and saw the kids, it just seemed like a fit. And so that's what brings me here tonight. So that's kind of my story. They told me to tell it in kind of an elevator speech. I'm at like the Empire State Building. I know it's probably a long elevator speech, but I would love to take some questions. Yes, sir.
Can you describe how you view and approach both philosophically and practically supervision and evaluation of your professional staff?
Sure. So I think there's been a lot of change in education around evaluation. I think I would say 10 years ago, you might run into a system in which people weren't evaluated, or if they were, I don't think it was actually useful. I remember being evaluated a few times, and it was just kind of a checkoff that you wanted to make sure that you got through as a teacher. I think right now there's much more accountability, and I think when you talk to teachers, I think there's still a lot of bureaucracy that's involved, but I think, at least in the system that I'm in, we really value going to have those discussions with teachers so that it's not a gotcha moment that you're looking for, but you're trying to go into classrooms and trying to evaluate and work with those teachers and hopefully be able to help them see things from an outside perspective that they might not see. And I also think you do that hand in hand with your professional development. So as a staff, you want to work on certain things as a building, and you also want to work individually with those teachers. And so I think as far as the professional staff, you have to go in and build trust. And I think that would probably be my first priority, is coming into a new school system, is to be able to build trust and hopefully move teachers forward. Yes?
Could you describe your philosophy on discipline in the middle school?
Sure. So when I was in Norwood, I would say I was like one of the chief discipline people in the building. And what you want to do is you want to use, hopefully, consequences to have kids learn. And so the whole overarching idea for me for discipline is that you want kids to make better decisions. And you want to make sure that you're clear with them, that you have trust, but there are some times that they're going to make poor decisions, and you want them not to repeat the mistakes and make those same decisions. And I do feel with certain kids, it's a little bit of a moving target. There are certain kids that are going to need a little bit more of a strict approach. There's going to be some kids who are going to have to be talked with the guidance counselors, and you're going to have to make sure to the best of their ability that whatever they need to understand what they did was something they shouldn't have done, and hopefully if you have consequences, it's related, and then from there, they're able to move on and make better decisions. It's supposed to be part of the learning process. So one of the things about middle school is we have teachable moments every day. Every day, kids are going to make mistakes. And one of the beauties about middle school is we have the opportunity to teach them. It's an opportunity in an age in which kids are trying to figure out their identity and trying to figure out who they are and where different boundaries are. And so I think the discipline comes in is teaching them, and hopefully they're learning, just as they're learning social studies or math. Some things might be as simple as kids are coming in late every day. That to me is pretty clear cut. I don't want students arriving late to come to school today, because as they're walking to a classroom, a lot of times teachers have begun the lesson, they're interrupting the learning. There are some times that parents are having difficulty getting kids to school. They need a little support. To me, that's kind of a cut and dry thing. There's something else with discipline where maybe two kids are, having difficulty with each other, and they might push each other in the hallway. Well, then I have to figure out, what is it? Is it a bullying incident in which a kid is picking on someone? Is it two friends who just don't know how to get along? Is it a misunderstanding? I have to tease out what is the issue and then go from there and assign consequences. So when kids come into my office, I always try to remain curious. Why'd you do that? Well, what happened? Tell me what is going on. And from that, then I will try to figure out what's appropriate. Is that addressing?
Like, what would be a consequence of a kid coming in chronically late?
For us at Dover Sherburne, it might be that they have to spend lunch in the office. It might be that they have after school detentions. But then it's also depending on, is there a reason? Is the kid anxious? Is the kid, I remember there was probably last year, we had a kid who was arriving late to school all the time, but guess what? The kid was school phobic. I would have rather had him in 15 minutes late every day than skipping school or not wanting to go to school. So you do have to have a little bit of leeway with that, but overall, the idea is, I think, is if you level with kids and they understand what they did wrong and why there's a rule and why there's a consequence, then they can learn.
So in that kind of situation, would you reach out to the parents and communicate with them, or rely on
Yes.
the child to relay the message?
No, I think you have to reach out to the parents. So the best thing is when the parents and the teachers and the educators work together. So, if I'm assigning them a detention and they have to go see the assistant principal, which for some is, produces a lot of anxiety. When a kid comes home and says, I was in the principal's office, or I was in the assistant principal's office, I would wonder as a parent, like, why am I not being told that? I need to be called. Like, that's my child, and if they're going to see the assistant principal or the principal and there's some sort of discipline, I should, as a parent, know why that is. And so I will call. Now, there are some times that I will have a kid in and say, did you see something in the hall? I didn't. All right, have a good day. Like, I'm not calling necessarily if they're not directly involved. I'm not calling every parent, but I'm calling parents because I want to work with them, and I feel like if I'm not, then let's say something serious happens and I have to call and say, well, I've given him 3 detentions over the last 3 months. And as a parent, I'd say, why wasn't I alerted? Yeah.
So, this position has been held for a couple of years
Yep.
through an interim who's done a wonderful job supporting the school. And when this role takes over, there's going to be an absence of a grade.
Yeah.
And so what do you think the challenges are that the school's going to face, and how do you see that where leadership plays a role in that?
Right. So it's an interesting, I think, situation that the next building leader's walking into, because first of all, you have to deal with staff who are maybe losing kind of friends. They might have been, good friends with the 6th grade teacher for the last 5 years, and they're seeing them leave. There's a lot more space that's available. So I see the moving of 6th grade as being positive because of space, but I also realize that for staff, it's going to be a lot different. And I think it gives you an opportunity to kind of maybe reimagine some of the things of what the Ottoson wants to be about. But as a new person moving into the district, I can't show up and tell people what they want their school to be. I might be able to give them ideas of where we want to move forward, but the teachers who have been here for years and years and years, they're really the heart and soul of the school. And they're going to want to figure out what Ottoson wants to become. And I think that with parent groups who are going to want to maybe see some change, some of them maybe not, you've got to have those conversations. I see whoever takes this job over, they're going to be in a listening tour for the first 3 or 4 months. They're just going to be trying to figure out. It was interesting when I was in here for my day from 9 to 4, is I tried to be aware of what things people were bringing up. So there was a program that one of the teachers asked me, well, what do you think about this program? Then I went and talked to the kids, and they're like, I'm not sure about this program. All of a sudden, I'm like, ooh, that's twice. And then I'm walking down the hall, and I'm like casually talking to a teacher, and they're like, we have this program. And I'm like, oh, okay, that might be something we want to talk about. And so I think you have to listen, and I think you have to then come up with some sort of plan and some sort of vision of where you want to be. But I think you have to get the parents involved and the teachers. I think you're unsuccessful as any type of leader when you come in and you say, this is what we're gonna do, you're gonna buy it, and we're gonna go. Like, I think the most effective teachers that I have seen are teachers who are fully invested and have a say. And I think that's what I would be looking for, especially for the first couple months. Yeah.
I was wondering how you think the kids in your current school would describe you, and how you think the staff in your current school would describe your style.
I think the kids would say that I'm loud. I think they would think that I'm enthusiastic and energetic, and hopefully that I'm always around. I would also hope that on a little bit deeper level, they would describe me as someone who's fair and someone they could go talk to. So when I look at an assistant's role and even a principal's role, one of the things that I think is important is you're almost student services. So the most important thing a building leader does is make sure the school is safe for kids, physically, emotionally, socially safe. And that's really what you need to do primarily, is you need to have kids walk into that building and they feel comfortable and they feel safe. And I'm hoping that the students would describe me as someone that they could go to if they had issues or if they had problems and they felt that I was real approachable. That's what I would hope the students would say. And I hope the staff would feel the same way. So when you're a building administrator and you have formed trust, I think you have teachers who will walk through the door, sit down, and vent. They'll say, you know, I'm having trouble with this, or I'm having trouble with that, or I need a little time off because I have something at home. And I would hope that the teachers would say that I listen, and that I respect them, and that I will, you know, listen to them, and hopefully be there when they need me to be. That being said, you're not out for a popularity contest or to be everyone's friends, because there are other times that you have to have those difficult conversations with people when they're not doing what they should be, or when you think that they might not have handled a situation well, or you don't think they were maybe fair to someone. So you can't just be the nice guy, because you have a responsibility overall to do what's in the best interest of kids. And that's hopefully at the bottom line is what I always want to remember is I'm there for the best interest of kids. I remember years ago there was an interview question that in Norwood, and they said, well, there's really like 3 stakeholders. You have the teachers, you have the kids, and you have the parents. What is the most important? And I was like, the kids. I would like all of them to feel valued and important, but I'm going to do what's in the best interest of kids. That's what schools are for. Yes.
What's been your experience, or what are your thoughts on developing cultural competency in the staff and in the students so that the school is a welcoming and safe place for all of the learners?
Right. So I would say that I think as a school system, I think there's a lot of school systems that are struggling with this throughout the state. So I would say in Dover-Sherburne, I would say that we have a small community. So we have 525 students at our middle school. And I would say that this year, there's been more incidents of, you know, graffiti in the bathroom or racial slurs than has been there in my first 4 years. And I think what we've done to address that is we brought the whole school together and we had a conversation about this. And for a lot of these kids, we're trying to teach them about what is appropriate, teaching them about respect. We try to do things that hopefully is inviting of all. So once again, that everyone feels safe. And so, well, it might mean that, you know, last year the principal and I rode in on the Metco bus because we wanted to feel like what that was like. We didn't know what that morning felt for some of our Boston students who were coming in. We have an affinity group that we've met with to be able to talk. The high school, I think, did an incredible job in which they had a panel discussion in front of the whole student body. This is the high school, not the middle school, in which we had different people who spoke from the heart about what their life was like recently. We were lucky enough to have someone of the Jewish faith. Had a transgender student. We had a Metco student. We had a couple teachers, and they all addressed it. I thought it was one of the more powerful assemblies that I've ever attended, where we had kids, peers, talking to their peers. And I think that is extremely powerful, because I think a lot of times as adults, we tell kids, you should behave this way. And I think some of the most powerful things are when kids address other kids and say, this is hurtful, or I need, you to stop doing whatever you're doing. But I think it's something with all across the Commonwealth. I think schools are struggling with this issue, and you have to keep working on it, and you have to keep being creative and figure out how you get a culture that everyone feels accepted. Yes?
With that example
Yeah.
on the graffiti,
Yep.
what sort of communication strategy did you implement to communicate that to parents, to the public, et cetera?
Yeah, we sent out letters to the parents, just addressing them. I think one of the things that happens is when school systems aren't transparent, that they get themselves in trouble. And so I think when there's an incident that happens, you have to name it. You have to say, this is happening, and we need to work, and we need to be better at things. And so I think we were pretty clear in, telling and explaining to people what was happening. I also think that, for one student, we had to discipline that student a little severely, because we thought that student needed to have that certain consequences. So I think as a school system, so I was a history teacher, and I'm always like, I've always enjoyed it. I'm always like, it's the cover up that kills you, and if we're trying to project this image that we're like this just wonderful place that nothing bad happens, then we're not really being honest. And I think you have to express that, and you have to talk to people, and you have to reach out. So we sent a couple letters. We grabbed the school together, and I think most of the feedback has been real positive, and we are also reaching out to groups as well to help us, because that's the other thing. Like, as a school system, you're supposed to be pretty knowledgeable in things, but we're not knowledgeable in everything. And so sometimes we have to reach out to people outside the community who can come in and teach us. And so we did that as well. Yes?
Yes, can you give us an example of a time when you made a mistake and what you learned from it?
Yes, so unfortunately I make mistakes weekly, and I think that's the process of learning. So it's everything from getting a kid sent to my office and me giving the student a consequence, and then all of a sudden I'm not following up with that teacher, and then the teacher interacts with that student in a way that they shouldn't, and it's my fault because I didn't go to that teacher and tell that teacher what happens. It's my sometimes jumping to a conclusion when something happens with a kid, and then having to go apologize to that student because I made an assumption that I shouldn't have. So I'm gonna make mistakes. I mean, I'm gonna make, unfortunately I'm gonna keep making mistakes. I wanna keep them small, and I wanna learn from them, and I wanna apologize when I do. But I think as an administrator, you have a lot of decisions you have to make. I mean, daily you're making decisions, weekly, yearly, and you have to be honest and own the mistakes that you're gonna make. And I think in a real trusting culture, people will let you know when you make a mistake, but they'll do it very politely. And so I try to also have that same philosophy with my staff. Yes?
Yes, in your introduction you mentioned that in your new position you're looking forward to implement new things that you learned.
Yeah.
What were those things?
I think a lot of it has to do with, so I think if I had an entry plan to come in here, that I'd want to be on almost a listening tour to find out what are the issues of the Ottoson. Because I think I can't come in and say, I'm the expert. How do I talk to people who have been here 5, 10, 15 years and tell them that I'm all-knowing? But I do feel like there are certain things that, as a building leader, that you're able to provide information. So I look at some of the things that happen with trust and culture that I would want to provide to the teachers. We're finding out more and more about kids who are introverted, for example, and what kind of education they need. I think you have to talk about differentiating instruction and looking at kids individually and what they need. I think there are processes that maybe we are successful with in a system I've been in before, like Dover Sherburne, that might be RTI, or maybe we had a different discipline process. So I don't know exactly what I can't say I would bring in A, B, and C, but I do know that I have, we're implementing an RTI program, which is something called response to intervention. I don't know the state of it here, but it's to hopefully look at individual students and find out what they need and really look at them as an individual. I know that we have 504 protocols at our school. I don't know what they are here. I don't know if they can be improved upon. Maybe the Ottoson is doing a better job in the school that I'm at. But I have been at 4 different schools, and I think I've been able to pick up things that they've done well and carry them with me. Yes?
As part of the Maple Consortium, Arlington as a district has committed itself to personalized learning.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering your thoughts about personalized learning, how you would try to bring that more into the school here, especially with some teachers who are, been here a long time and
Right.
view it as a difficult thing to embrace.
So I don't know about the Maple. Is there any more?
Well, it's
Is
a
that
consortium of
okay,
schools
okay.
that are committed to figuring out, to exploring personalized learning and try to implementing more of it.
Right. So I think one of the things we're trying to do at Dover Sherburne is talking about differentiating the instructions. So finding out where kids are and meeting them where they are. So it's talking about learning styles, it's talking about project-based learning, it's talking about meeting the students where they are and hopefully giving them an experience in which they can excel. So I think for a lot of schools or traditional schools, it's been a one-size-fits-all, and we're realizing that we need to be able to catch those kids who aren't the traditional learners. There's a lot of learners who can sit, like here, if I was teaching this class, taking notes and moving on, but I think there's a lot of things that you need to do to look at the individual. So I had mentioned RTI, which is response to intervention, which is looking at individual students and finding out what they need. And I think the biggest issue at middle school is sometimes teachers feel like if they are having different standards for different kids, it's not fair. And I actually think you have to give students what they need. And so if a student needs, for example, more hands-on, that's something you should be able to provide.
So how do you address with the faculty that maybe is a little reluctant to embrace some of these new things?
So I think the biggest, probably successful way to do that is we'll occasionally have faculty members, they'll be at our faculty meetings and they'll show what they're doing. I think it's always more powerful for another staff member to talk to a staff member and show them what they're doing in the classroom and to get excited about that and to use that to be able to get change. I think it's more difficult for me to be able to say, you need to do this. I found it's more effective if I have some teachers that I feel are doing things that I really want to highlight, and then they're able to meet with the other teachers and be able to pass their knowledge. At the school that I'm at, people are excited about teaching, and they want to share, I need to give them the venue that they can share, and I want to give them a venue that they're able to learn if they need something. So if you're working as a science teacher with someone else, and that science teacher can show you, wow, I'm doing this wonderful thing that's great, then as an administrator, I want to make sure you have time to work together, and then if you need some learning, that I'm able to provide that. Excellent.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Elizabeth Golden, but I'm called Lisa. Nickname-wise, my mom couldn't make a decision, so she went with Elizabeth, and I'm called Lisa. So we'll get that right out of the way. I'm excited to be here tonight. I know that you all have a one-pager that really doesn't fully explain who I am, but it gives you the bullet points. I think the important things to know about me is that I've been a middle school educator or an educator, secondary educator. This is my 25th year, and I'm proud of that. I was never one to intend to go into education. I'm definitely a firm believer of where the path is going to take me is where I'm going to go. When I was at UMass Amherst, I studied sociology and criminology with an intent to go to law school. And I was a psychology minor and ended up in Amherst in some elementary classrooms. And that's the route I took. I ended up deciding not to apply to law school and decided to pursue psychology and education instead. And again, the path just led itself. It may have been unconventional. I went and decided to get my master's in education without having spent a long amount of time in classrooms, whereas today, most teachers start out with a bachelor's and then they're getting their master's along the way. Went in kind of blindly, ended up doing my student teaching in Brookline, and then ended up working in a mental health facility for 2 years. Probably the best thing I ever did in my career was probably being a mental health worker, because it's informed everything that I've done till now. There was nothing that in any of the jobs I've been in that can't contribute to what I do today with middle schoolers. And so the rest you can easily read. I spent 6 years in Boston at a therapeutic day school. I was filmed weekly, supervised. Probably the best education and training I ever received was at the Judge Baker Children's Center. And then opportunity led me to the public schools, and I ended up on the North Shore. I'm Boston born and bred. I graduated from Brookline High. I lived in Brighton for many years. I love that Arlington is like 6 miles from Boston. I'm a true Bostonian and a New England Patriots fan, and a Boston Bruins fan. I grew up with brothers who were hockey players. But I always said if I moved out of the city, I'd move close to the ocean. So that's how I ended up on the North Shore. I ended up in Lynn. That was my introduction to the public schools. And the work I did there also informs what I do today. I worked with alternative students. I worked in alternative settings. I worked at Lynn English High in order to get some more large school experience. I was given feedback by many people that I worked with over time to pursue my CAGs and look at administration. And if you'll note, once I did receive that at Salem State, I didn't even get an administrative job till 2 years later. So everything has been thoughtful and deliberate. I'm here tonight definitely as a thoughtful educator. I'm not doing this process willy-nilly. You don't get up in front of people and try to convince middle school parents that I'm the candidate. I will tell you, though, that at the time I've spent with middle schoolers over the years, I pride myself in my communications with parents and families. I'm dedicated to seeing middle schoolers succeed, and I see this as a unique opportunity. I've come from a school system where we're going through waves of different change. Even today, there was a big announcement in my district that a school is actually closing. So it's been a long day, and I like opportunities where we can see change and we can see growth. The unique thing about this is I've never worked in a setting where it's just simply 7th and 8th graders. Currently in my current school, I am the 7th grade administrator. So I spend my life with 7th graders every single day. And often parents will say to me, how do you do this? Like, they can't wait for their child to be out of the 7th grade, and I live 7th grade 180 days a year. So I don't think there's any other way to frame it except on that piece of paper. But to let you know that I am excited about the opportunity here, and I'm excited to hear your questions this evening. Sure.
Can you describe how you approach supervision and evaluation of professional staff?
Supervision and evaluation with professional staff is a dialogue. It's got to be back and forth. It's not about me going into a classroom and telling a teacher what's wrong or what's right. It's got to be constructive, and it also has to have action steps. So I think what I want to see when I go in classrooms is I want to see a lesson agenda. I want to see that there's learning objectives. I want to see students engaged. I certainly don't want to see all teacher talk time. So I wouldn't want to go in a classroom and see just blah, 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 blah for 20 or 25 minutes or 30 minutes just teacher directed. I want to see students engaged in the classroom. I want to see students grappling with problems. And I want to see that teachers are there as the facilitators, providing rigorous instruction, providing opportunities for students to grapple with that. And so the way I see supervision is it's a matter of me visiting classrooms frequently, providing that feedback, and then action steps moving forward.
Hi, what's been your experience developing cultural competencies with your staff and your students, just to make sure that the school is a safe and inviting place where all kids' cultures and identities are honored?
That's been a big part, especially I would say probably over the last 4 or 5 years. That's been a big part of my work at my current school, because we became an extended day school, an expanded learning school. So we really worked on developing a safe culture where everyone feels included, but not just a matter of checking off the list, so to speak. What we really try to do is make sure that everyone feels welcome and included, despite whatever they bring to the table. We're going to meet you there in terms of your learning needs, your background, and your culture. We've worked hard with PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, in terms of acknowledging that all students bring something to our school, and if students need help with something, in terms of how we treat each other. As part of that, a wing of that is the Expect Respect curriculum. So we really work on our core values of communication, cooperation, and trust in terms of respecting each other, how we live our day every day. So I would say it's not just a matter of like the events, the culture nights, inviting the parents in, but it's what we're doing every day, and that we're demonstrating it all the time, and that we're making sure that in our classrooms and our staff, we're working in PD and in small groups to forward that all of the time. It's not something that you're ever finished working on.
In many ways, middle school, but in some ways, Lynn and Salem are much bigger districts and different districts in Arlington. I'm wondering if you can talk to some of the differences in your experience.
I would say there's even differences between Lynn and Salem. Lynn is probably one of the top 10 urban districts in the state, so that's definitely a different. I mean, I worked in Lynn for 9 years and had literally no idea what I was entering to when I got to Salem. Salem is unique in its, it has an urban aspect, but somebody said to me the other day, well, it would depend upon your definition of urban. So I don't like to pigeonhole it, and you're right, middle school is middle school, and many of the situations in terms of when students get to school, parents' concerns about their student feeling safe at school, and a rigorous education pretty much come across the board. I think for me, just in the fact that like since the announcement about the finalists, former colleagues or friends that now live in Arlington have reached out to me, which is interesting, and I've appreciated their input and letting me know like you know middle school Arlington is a great community. Yes, it's smaller, it's different, but I think every community has the right to have its uniqueness, and they have their priorities about what's important. For the families, I mean, for me, I think the most important part is to make sure that someone is hearing what families in the community are looking for their students, and from community to community, that is going to be different. So yes, Arlington is different than Salem, yet Salem is different than Lynn as well, and different than Boston. The nice thing about Arlington is we've come out a little ways away from Boston, but I think for me, it would be getting to know a new community again. I wasn't from Lynn, I wasn't from Salem, I've had that experience of moving from community to community, so that's something that's like right at the top of my list.
Right, so looking a little bit ahead, what would you be looking most forward to if you would start here? And what would be the things you definitely want to implement here after spending a day here at the school? You've probably seen something or have some ideas.
I think what I'm most looking forward to, like I already said, was the opportunity to be in a school that only has the 7th and 8th grade. And how is that going to look when students are coming from 5th grade to 6th grade, working with the Gibbs, and then moving here, and then how will it look when they're transitioning out to high school. So for me, that's exciting, because I have not worked in just with those 2 grades specifically. So that's going to be interesting, because I'm used to having the 6th graders come, working with the 7th grade, and then getting the 8th graders. This is just a 2-year step, so it even seems quicker. That's one thing. I think from spending my day here was hearing from the students, to be quite honest. I spent time at lunch with 7th graders who were very clear about what they wanted to see, which I thought was interesting. They were awesome. They really were. They talked about wanting another ACE class. They wanted more acceleration. They wanted more opportunities for coding, more enrichment, and one young lady wanted to be able to have more science labs that were hands-on because she wants to be able to do dissections. So for me, that was, I mean, how can you sum it up better? I mean, you know, they're like, well, we have an opportunity. If the 6th grade is leaving, then we're going to have more rooms, right? So you can schedule more of these things. So for me, I would want to, I could never say, well, I know exactly what I would want to do. I really feel like it's a team approach. There's already so many things that are happening here, so many things that are in place. So it would be a matter of joining that team, finding out what the priorities were. But I can't say, I've told that story many times already to people about those 7th graders, because that was amazing.
Can you just say something about your approach towards discipline, student discipline?
Like I said
also maybe
earlier,
how it's evolved or changed over
mine's evolved, to be quite honest. I mean, doing this is my 25th year. I mean, there's probably many people in this room that are younger than me, but when I started, and even how I was trained as an administrator, has changed now. And I would say, and I've already said this many times, that being involved in positive behavior interventions and supports, when that was introduced in my district, and they said this is going to reduce discipline, this is going to reduce incidences of suspensions, detentions, how much further positive acknowledgements go in the class, rather than always pointing out what students aren't doing, but flipping it. And I was like, oh, okay, really? And then I'm probably one of the biggest promoters now. And I can definitely talk about, like, it even changed my style. It even changed how I speak and interact with students. Basing everything in the core values of what my school is about, any conversation I have, I can basically say, so is that the expectations we have when we're in the cafeteria? Like, what are they? Was that positive? Even when today, waiting for buses and students were frustrated. It was a half day in my district, so there's one bus that comes a little later. Some negative language. I'm like, you're still, hey, positive. Let's keep it positive. We got to be patient. So it's just like those little shifts that you can make where it doesn't need to be just because I say so it needs to happen, but let's think about and reflect on our behavior right now. I think that's more would sum up my approach to discipline. Now I'm going to go right here.
What specific example can you give that was your biggest challenge in your job or your current position, and how did you manage that challenge or that
The biggest challenge, would probably be when we became an expanded learning school. This is our 4th year. Probably the biggest challenge was meeting with a group like this of parents that were like, this is never gonna work. I'm not sending my student here, my child here. You're gonna start at 7:30 and you're not gonna dismiss until 3:30? So that's an 8-hour school day. We're in our 4th year of doing that. I think having to go and do the work to plan for that and be thoughtful about that, which we spent a year doing, and then be able to present that to all our community stakeholders and be able to assure parents that this was going to be a rigorous and thoughtful learning process for their student and was going to be okay. It was actually, and not just because we needed to do it as a district, but it was something we were pursuing as a school, was probably one of the biggest challenges that I've faced. And it took a lot of moving pieces and changing things. Schedules, teachers, staff, the building, families, how they were going to get there, transportation. I mean, it involved like everything. That's probably my most specific example. Sure.
Hi. So, Ottoson has had an interim principal who's done a wonderful job for the last 2 years here. And with her exit, also goes the 6th grade. And so left behind at Ottoson are 2 grades. And I'm wondering what you see on the horizon for that experience for staff and students and families here with those changes, and how you might address those challenges or those really awesome moments.
I would imagine it's a shift. It's a huge shift, like I've already, alluded to. I think communication is the biggest piece. I really do. I think that you have to make sure that you're communicating with your staff, they're in the know, they're knowing what's going to happen next. Then the same with a group like here. Families need to know what's coming, what can you expect, what can you look forward to. And then making sure that all of those people are in the know, whether that's meetings like this, weekly newsletters, updates, meeting with the staff on a regular basis, and if you can't, making sure that you get their feedback in some fashion or format. So making sure that you have those focus groups, or you make sure that you meet with content level or grade level, to make sure that as we're going through, and we've done this where I've been, is that we've realized from year to year, oh, we should fix this. This part doesn't work in the schedule. Teachers aren't getting common planning time here. Parents are worried about this piece. So I would say, for me, I think the biggest piece is the communication piece to all stakeholders. Because if you're not doing that piece, then people feel like they're not being told, or they're not being asked for their feedback. And that's the most important. Hi.
Hi. So what do you think with this age group is the most effective way to deal with bullying situations? Because one thing, I have younger kids too, and I've just noticed it's so different what works at the middle school level and what works at the elementary school level. So I wonder how you go about protecting kids if you find a situation like that that's already happening.
I think, one, it begins with the culture of the school. So again, you have to have, again, in 25 years, I've seen that change over time, obviously with the advent of all the social media, the phones and things that happen outside of the school and then roll into the school and impact the culture of the school. I think what we found is, again, I'll go back to the PBIS and the expect respect. While it may look different at the elementary, moving to the middle and moving to the high school, it's also district-wide. It's good to have something that we all embrace. With expect respect, it's very easy to be able to say that what's the word at your school when you expect someone to stop? Giving students the tools and the learning piece, because a lot of it is around social emotional learning, which now we have to do more of the teaching around that, especially with online self-management, your feelings, how do you solve a conflict? I spend a lot of my day realizing when I hear from a parent or I hear from a teacher that a student is unhappy or feeling like they are a target of some sort of either harassment or bullying behavior, which may not go all the way to the law level, is that often can be resolved by giving the students the tools or letting them know that there are safe adults at home, and then there are also safe adults in the building that they can come to, and kind of doing away with that. Once you have it as part of the culture of the school and students know, like, okay, these are the tools we can use, I can say stop, I can seek support, I can find an adult that's safe, so that like, it's not about telling on someone, it's not about the mentality like I can't tell anybody because the retaliation will be worse. I think it really starts with the culture in the school. How we treat each other, staff to student, student to staff, student to student, staff to staff. Like, it has to be the entire community. The most important part is making sure that we know. So, and letting students know too. There's got to be someone in the building or outside of the building, someone you can go to. So making sure that it's addressed, that it's not ignored. Hi.
Knowing what you know about the Ottoson and your time here, limited.
Yes.
But knowing what you know about the situation, I mean, what do you think are the top 2 or 3 things that are characteristics of yourself that you think you will be able to bring and apply in a really positive way here? What do you think your top 2 or 3 learning areas?
I think in terms of strength, I would highlight some of the things I've already said. One, in terms of communication, and also being timely in my communication. So making sure that, like, emails, phone calls, those are answered, and the communication gets out to the Ottoson community or the school community when things are happening. So I think in terms of written and verbal communication, I would consider that one of my strengths. I think bringing my energy and being positive about always looking at middle school every day with a fresh start, even after all this time, being able to take on the challenge or the change of whatever change is coming. I feel like I'm prepared to do that you have to look at it from an operational level and a logistical level, and then you have to look at it through the lenses of the students and their families. So I'd say I consider that a strength. I would say in terms of learning areas, one, it would be learning about a new community, and I've done that before, but it's work, and you have to, it's just like anything else. If it's growing, you have to tend to it, so it wouldn't be something where I can just show up and like, ooh, I'm a member of the Ottoson community now. That wouldn't happen. I would have to work at that. So that would be a learning curve naturally. I think the other thing that people would probably tell you that already know me is that I have very high expectations for myself and for others. So that can be, sometimes that's a little bit difficult. When you're meeting new people, they may not expect the bar to be this high. And it's not like I'm expecting everyone to meet it, but sometimes I feel like my level of energy and professionalism, everybody else should have the same level, and that's not always the case. So that is also a natural learning curve. Hi.
Hi. Following up from that, could you give an example of where you've had a disagreement with a teacher and how you dealt with that?
Sure. Just even this week, communication went out from a teacher that probably should have passed through an administrator, but not probably should have passed through an administrator. I keep remember I'm on camera, so I'm like, should have gone to an administrator first before the notification went out to parents. I think for me, probably some people will say they're surprised at how direct I am. I think when I find that there's something that like we need to talk about, I do it in a respectful way. Did this happen? Did this go out? Okay, any chance that we could meet? Let's talk about it. So I think being open about it, not just doing it all through email, but making sure there's a face-to-face conversation, making sure to be respectful of whatever that teacher or staff member's learning curve is, where are they at, and how can I provide them with constructive feedback, but also make sure that we both understand what the expectations are within a school, what we can do, what the roles are, and that if there is something that needs to be worked on, what are the action steps that we're going to do to make sure that we work on it to resolve the situation. Hi.
Hi. You mentioned high performance levels and high expectations. I was just curious about what your expectations of taking reasonably high-performing schools like Ottoson, you're in the top 20th percentile on MCAS, and I realize MCAS is not particularly good measure, but it's the only measure that I can have to look at. And how to take a school from that level to say to the 90th percentile, and how your past experiences have shaped in terms of how you can take a school to a higher performance level. When I looked at your current school and the performance level, and if I read it correctly, it was in the bottom 20th percentile in MCAS scores. So I'm just curious how that experience and some of your other experiences might help the school to achieve even higher performance.
And that's something that actually, while we are where we are, we were much lower than that 4 or 5 years ago. So I think being a turnaround school, while this is not a turnaround district or a turnaround school, we are making progress. And what we've noticed now is that we don't have to provide as many interventions to students because we do have students making progress. And we also look at that as standards-based instruction and what more accelerations and enrichments we can provide to students. Now, obviously, at my school, it's a much smaller percentage. I think, again, I would refer back to the beginning where it's students here, and that obviously struck me and stuck with me, that they were asking for more enrichments, more accelerations, more coding opportunities. So yes, I guess for me, I would be able to take some of the hard work I did to even get us from where we were to where we are now, and we're still obviously working towards that. You could apply some of the same, you don't need that same intensity and energy in terms of coming from the bottom 20, but there are ways to make sure that students are not just staying here, that they want to push harder. And from what I heard from those 7th graders, they want more of those opportunities. They were disappointed that they only had one opportunity or one class that could only accommodate ACE. It's ACE, right? Am I right? Yeah. So I mean, so for me, it would be providing more of those. Whereas at my school, as you so pointed out, we had to work more at the basic level and the interventions to bring up that progress.
Following up from that, could you talk about how balancing that, we're consistently getting messages about how anxiety is growing, and we have these students who are striving and are interested in and aware of where we are in the MCAS and where they're going. Kids are planning earlier and earlier. We're trying to balance that out with just being a 7th grader, being an 8th grader, and having balance. And you know, you see Lexington is right next door. So there's a comparison of where Arlington has grown and where we're going. And while the MCAS are something to certainly look at, there's the balance in their mental state. And with your background in that, do you have a philosophy?
I do. I think it would have to go back to, very simply stated, looking at the whole child. Making sure that, like, while we're bringing up these rigorous academics and we have these high expectations and students internalize those, we've even found that having the balance of being able to be a 7th or 8th grader and still, you know, have a full, not just the content areas, but accessing the arts, the music, the drama. Like, even with where we are, we're making sure that students are able to explore those opportunities. That's what, I mean, I think I didn't have a really good grasp of that until we expanded our day, and then we had opportunities to give those to students. And by doing that, and it's not the same as here, but in some ways, giving students an opportunity to access an enrichment or an activity that they might not have the opportunity to do outside of school. And watching those students go through that and just be able to be a 7th grader and try something different that they might not have tried before. I mean, those students here who asked for coding is the #1 enrichment elective at my school. So while we may be in 2 different parts of the state, you know, making sure that students have and the other big one, the other huge one, cooking. You know, it's like, you would not believe what cooking does and how that brings the students together, how the cooking elective puts, for our National Junior Honor Society, they do the dinner for that National Junior Honors. So there's lots of ways to demonstrate mastery and performance. So that's how I would respond to that. I was excited about coming here tonight. I did enjoy my visit to Ottoson, and I like thinking about the future and what it could possibly be. And I welcome a challenge, and I appreciate meeting all of you tonight.